Hey there, viewers. Ever noticed your dog tilting its head? What do you think it means? How about their fascination with licking themselves? And you, man's best friend, has a few peculiar habits, to say the least. From smelling butts to eating their own feces, some of these habits might seem weird to us, but make perfect sense for canines. Did you know dogs sniff each other's butts to get to know them? We're uncovering and explaining some pretty bizarre pooch traits. But before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more pet-related content. Let's get started with 10 common dog behaviors finally explained. Number 10, tilting their heads. Your beloved pooch looking at you with its big adorable eyes and with its head tilted towards the side, could there be a more precious sight? You might have noticed your pet tilting its head to the side quite often, actually. Why do you think they do that? Most people would bet it's to focus on a particular object or sound, but that's just one of the few reasons. Animals are highly sensitive to sounds, a lot more than humans are. They'll hear sounds from several feet over and at frequencies humans can't comprehend. However, if a sound manages to make it past your pet, they'll tilt their heads to focus better. For example, if you whisper, "Playtime," and your pet wants to make sure of it before it starts leaping towards the door, it'll probably tilt its head to the side. Another reason why dogs tilt their heads is to reestablish balance. The inner ear contains a fluid that is responsible for keeping us in equilibrium. Basically, the fluid keeps us standing straight when it's undisrupted and gets us dizzy when it's disturbed. If an animal grimaces while tilting their head, they're probably trying to reestablish their balance. Lastly, animals that are muzzled often would tilt their heads to a side to focus on distant objects. Number 9. Coprophagia. Coprophagia is a pretty elaborate way of saying that your dog eats its own feces. However, this behavior is probably weird only for the pet parent and not for the pet themselves. Long before animals were domesticated, they lived in the wild and survived on whatever they could make it by. This including eating their own feces. While wolves weren't necessarily fond of eating their own excrements, they sometimes did it out of necessity. Interestingly, dogs would even eat blades of grass to mimic their ancestors. Experts have tried to come up with logical explanations for why dogs eat their own feces, but besides extreme hunger, nothing really seems to stick. In the wild, wolves eat their own feces only when food was scarce or when they were on a long hunt. Needless to say, you shouldn't be encouraging your pet to eat its own excrement. While it might not be as peculiar as most pet parents would have initially thought, it is something that could potentially make them sick. Number 8, smelling butts. How would you greet someone you've just met? Odds are you'd probably go in for a handshake and then exchange pleasantries. How would you expect canines to greet one another? Well, they sniff each other's butts. Now, that might seem peculiar and unnecessary to humans, but it makes sense to dogs. Why? Because dogs have sensitive scent receptors and stimulators in their anal glands. Essentially, a dog's anal glands are their passports. They give other dogs information about their breed, age, temperament, and even their health. Animals that have just met one another would circle each other to make sure the other was friendly and then go in for a sniff. Number 7, vocalization. Unfortunately, we're still a few centuries away from devising technology that would allow us to use actual words to communicate with our pets, but we've learned quite a lot about their sounds and actions to effectively communicate with them, at least somewhat. But dogs don't just make one sound. They bark, howl, and woof. What does their vocalization mean? Is there a difference between a barking dog, a howling one, and one that woofs? Yeah, actually there is. Dogs bark to get their pet parents' attention. The bark is typically a high-pitched sound that is meant to get someone's attention. They might even bark to get an intruder's attention, probably to tell them that they've been perceived as a threat and that the canine isn't afraid to attack. Howling is typically reserved for other canines. A howl is a low-pitched sound intended to communicate with other dogs in the neighborhood. What is a woof supposed to mean? Nothing really. A woof is a sound dogs would make if they're bored, whining, or are just trying to get everyone's attention. Number 6, playing fetch. Why is it that dogs seem to love playing fetch a whole lot more than other pets? This is probably because the usual fetching tool, a tennis ball, is a lot more entertaining to dogs than it is to cats or birds. Dogs associate tennis balls with prey. Basically, the tennis ball or prey is trying to escape, and they must catch it and bring it back to its owner. Dogs are predators. They'll chase at whatever is small, and their pet parent seems to want them to retrieve it. Number 5, staring right into your eyes. A dog would stare right into your eyes if they're in love with you or if they loathe you. There's no middle ground here. Animals that have a strong bond with their pet parents would stare into the eyes for long periods of time. This is also to form an even stronger bond with their pet parent. However, a dog that barely knows you would only stare into your eyes if it's threatening to you. This is why experts recommend that a new pet parent allow dogs to get comfortable with them at their own pace. If a pet parent is becoming overbearing, their dog might look into their eyes to tell them to back off. But you'd think they're doing it out of love. Number 4, humping. We'd expect humping to be pretty commonplace for a dog that hasn't been altered. But would you be concerned if your altered dog starts to hump random objects around the house? Well, you shouldn't be. In some cases, most cases actually, humping is sexual. It's part of the mating process between unaltered dogs. In other cases, altered dogs would hump random things or other dogs just for fun. While they might not do it as often as dogs in heat would, the act is largely motivated by boredom over anything else. Humping only becomes a problem if it bothers you. For example, if your dog starts to hump random objects all day long, or if they're hurting other dogs, in which case the best way to alleviate the situation would be to train them to stop. Number 3, digging. Digging seems to be a synonymous trait with dogs. You'd think all dogs dig and that they do it senselessly. Well, you'd be wrong in both cases. Not all dogs dig. Hyperactive dogs typically dig a lot more than others, and medium-sized dogs would dig the most compared to smaller or larger-sized breeds. But why do they dig? One of the more common reasons to explain this behavior is because they're trying to safely hide away something. In most cases, this would be their favorite toy or a bone. In some cases, dogs dig to find themselves a cool enough spot underground to lie down in for a while. Then again, in some cases, dogs dig because they're anxious. It's pretty easy to spot the difference between the three. You just need to stay vigilant. Number 2, licking people. What could possibly compel a dog to run its tongue over your face? Love. Dogs lick people as a sign of affection. The behavior is probably picked up from adolescents when their mothers would lick them to comfort them. Dogs would lick their pet parents either to show affection or to comfort them if they sense their parents are distressed. Then again, sometimes your pet licks you to tend to your wounds. It's what works for them, and they're trying to see if it works for you too. Number 1, leaning against you. Giant dog breeds tend to lean against their pet parents as a sign of affection or to comfort themselves in a stressful situation. Your dog might be trying to get close to you either to show affection or to get your attention to comfort them in case they're anxious. As a responsible pet parent, you should be able to differentiate between what's affection and what's anxiety. If your dog is whimpering and looking down, they're probably anxious. Either remove the trigger from your dog's space or take your dog somewhere it feels comfortable. Hey, know of any odd dog behaviors yourself? Be sure to comment them down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to Inforama for more fun content. Until then, bye for now.